transitioning from preschool over to kindergarten? Good question. Your daughter will start kindergarten in August. She currently receives speech, occupational therapy, and special education services as a weekly drop-in at the elementary school. I saw later in your question reference of a registered behavior tech, sort of indicative of autism or developmental delay. And so, of course, my question, stopping your question right there, is why they only offered your daughter weekly drop-in services in the elementary school. Because if your daughter has, let's say, a diagnosis of autism, developmental delay, for example, then in many respects, you should have been offered far more services. They have a mandate, the school system does, during those preschool years to make an offering of a free and appropriate public education available to you. It's different than the standard for kindergarten on until graduation because of compulsory education. The child is there. For preschool, it's a little bit different to where there's a negotiation factor, but the school district has 100% of the responsibility to provide your child with a free, appropriate public education, just like they're responsible once your child hits kindergarten and beyond. But the problem is that in many, many states, they claim that they don't have the funding for preschool, and they end up shaving preschool programs. And if you're in Alabama, then they've really been shaving preschool programs because the state has been handing out crack money in the form of their first-class preschools. And their first-class preschools are not special education programs. They're neurotypical special education programs that your child potentially could be included in if they get selected in the lottery. All right, so that way they can get away with not discriminating, is that they have a lottery. Therefore, your child's chance was just as good as anybody else's to get in. But I mention that because I just find it strange, and you didn't provide me any more information, but I'm just offering that. And I know that you have a great relationship with your school, so I'm not necessarily talking to you. There's a lot of parents who are going to be looking at this. And I want to make that clear, guys, that depending on the nature of your child's evaluations and the severity of their needs, the reason we provide services starting at 3 years old through the public school system is so that we can attack this window of opportunity that we have to where we can try to address those educational performance deficits in academics, in communication, in social emotional development. And if they're not offering your child a full-time preschool program of at least 20 hours a week, and then wrapping in the speech language and wrapping in the occupational therapy, and for example, if autism's in there, wrapping in ABA services, strategies, therapies, then they're not offering you appropriate services. They're shortchanging you. And especially if you're having to go out and supplement and get all these services, let's say ABA, privately, then at that point, especially if you're coming out of pocket, I mean, if it's insurance, I get it. All right. We fought hard in Alabama to get that insurance reform for autism. So, I don't, if you have the insurance, great. But if not, and you're having to come out of pocket, that school system had a responsibility to make an offering of FAPE available to you. And then if you decided to, just take a reduction in those services of weekly drop-in, then, it needs to be notated that you were at least offered this. This is what your child's deficits through our thorough evaluations when she first came to us, told us she required per the science, and then the parent, because of work schedules or family schedules or because of concerns that the child isn't developmentally ready to try that. Many parents make those decisions. Doesn't absolve the district from making an offering based upon what the evaluations say. So keep that in mind. Now, with the rest of the question, should there be a transition? Yes. And and I don't care if that IEP expires in September. That has nothing to do with that transition. That's just the implementation dates from this date to this date. And they should be working to start doing that transition now, developing that IEP now. Because what sort of frightens me about your situation is many school systems take a get to know you approach, and there is no get to know you clause in the law. There is no get to know you clause. And the danger for a child that had drop-in services and didn't have that full preschool program, they don't really know your child. Really. Especially if your child's been involved in some other private program. And if you have a private registered behavior tech that's been working with your child, that means does your child come with some behaviors, some need for redirection? Can your child stay seated? All those requirements that are required for a kindergarten general education class. And what I see a lot of schools that they have these preschool children that they introduce into kindergarten, and then it just doesn't take that long for them to start shuffling them to special education classes more, and it's all done, in this wait and see kind of, or wait and fail kind of approach, in my viewpoint. That's why we're supposed to evaluate, that 6 months before the child's third birthday, 2.5 to the third birthday. They're supposed to have that much time to fully understand the child and evaluate. Same thing for preschool. We have the entirety of the summer. We have that 3 to 5 year period that they're supposed to understand your child, update those evaluations, understand what we're dealing with, and then you have to presume competence. This is their first opportunity inside of a general education program school, as far as a traditional setting. Give the child an opportunity. But if they've already hamstrung your child because they don't have a plan and they're taking a wait and see approach because the expiration date isn't until September, those are all arbitrary. They're subjective factors. When this is supposed to be a safety net program, schools tend to be reactive instead of proactive. I just had that discussion today in a meeting earlier. That's why my hair's done. In a meeting about that entire situation. The parent called the meeting because the parent is wanting to be proactive. The school is reactive. That's what schools do, though. And when they started complaining to me about, this doesn't show this and this doesn't justify this, what I had to sit there and point out is that everything that the mom's saying I think is valid. And she does sort of have some foresight on what's coming in the near future. And I think it's very justifiable. And what I said was that we're going to be having this discussion 2 years from now. You guys don't want to have the discussion now as to what this child requires. But in 2 years you will. Because that's what typically happens, let's say with high functioning autism, with regards to written expression deficits and comprehension issues that have serious pragmatic problems, and then also has serious anxiety on their refusal to even go to school. See, all issues that aren't being addressed now. The school's ignoring it, and every excuse that they've thrown up are what I call institutional excuses. It's not limiting the IEP. The IEP team can do whatever they want. But these boxes that the institution, as the public school system itself, puts up, they're all arbitrary. And they're just boxes. They're institutional obstacles that don't need to be there. So in your particular situation, you have an institutional obstacle, a bunch of them, in my viewpoint, that don't need to be there. I don't care that the expiration date's in September. You got a big transition for her coming up. And what are they doing during the summer? They should be using the summer, and especially closer to the start of school, to acclimate her into this new setting, to know who the teachers are. Does she require an aide in general education? Who is her special education teacher? How much special education does she require? Because she's only been getting drop-in services, so they have no clue. And if they haven't updated their evaluations in the last, let's say, year, then they're based upon who your daughter was at 3 years old instead of who your child is now as an entering kindergarten. And so, you know, you may have had a great relationship with the school system. And guys, please understand me. You can have a great relationship with the school system and have them be doing the wrong thing. What ends up turning the tide and turning relationships toxic and negative are when parents clue in that they were robbed, that they were shortchanged, that their child was screwed over, that the school system had a greater responsibility based upon your child's needs and didn't do it. That's what upsets the parents. That's what destroys relationships. Those things are avoidable. How do you avoid them? Follow the freaking law. Follow the law. You have a duty to thoroughly evaluate in the way that works for the child's disability. Not disability category, but the child's disabilities. Because I have a lot of schools that go, wow, he's, you know, well, he has a diagnosis of autism. I don't care that you're covering him under OHI or specific learning disability. Don't care. What is the nature of the child's disability? What are the various test instruments that you need in order to understand baselines, you know, which is present levels of performance, so that you can create good goals, good services based upon the child's disabilities and needs. You start there. You start there, then you're not shortchanging anybody. You're not screwing anybody over. But I can't tell you how many years I've had this fight for preschool issues in Alabama. You know, we have the same problem everywhere, but I'm just saying in Alabama specifically, and especially since they created that animal, you know, for general education kids. You know, we get to kids earlier. You know, so you dump these millions of dollars to create these first-class preschools that are based upon a lottery system. And what did schools go out and do? They got rid of their internally funded special education preschool classrooms because they could save some money. And then they sit there and they tell parents, well, you know, you need to go look for a Mother's Day out or a church preschool, or, you know, we're going to do drop-in services. That's all we can do. BS. And I'm talking about big, fat BS. Dumpy, wet BS. That's a lie. They have an obligation to provide your child a FAPE. And it was their choice to take the crack money from the State Department of Education in destroying their own internal preschools that served mostly our special education students in a 50-50, or at least close to a 50-50 recommendation, which is what the National Academy of Sciences recommends in educating children with autism. They need a mixed classroom where it's 50% special education students, 50% neurotypicals. But because of the crack money and the creation of the first-class preschools that work off of a lottery system, they got rid of those. Many of those school systems did. It did not absolve them of their legal duties, though. It's just that parents don't know. But yes, you should be pressing them hard to have that IEP completed, figured out, done. If they need to update assessments, they need to do those now. And they need to presume competence for your daughter and provide her the supports that she requires, including allowing that RBT in. But quite frankly, a lot of schools aren't going to do that. Now, why won't they do that? Because it's your person. They don't want your person seeing what's really going on in that school. They can sit there and dress it up as security, COVID, which they're always going to do, or they're going to lie to you and say it's about student privacy. FERPA, which is about your student records, has nothing to do with people walking around the school and seeing things. It only applies to them not handing that RBT, your child or anybody else's child's actual records. But it doesn't mean that they're not going to come up with a litany of excuses to keep your person out. Okay, so if your person can't be there, they have to provide those services. But you need to know that now. You need to absolutely need to know that now. And I'd rather them just pull back that Band-Aid and just everybody go owie so that you understand what's really going on. because that's the only way you're going to be able to truly advocate for your daughter and what she requires. You can still be nice. You can still be nice, but this is a business, really. And the child is the product, and you're the CEO, and you need to know what's going on.